Let's get into actually adding some color to our self-portrait. So we went over some basic shapes like the circle, the ellipse, rectangle, line, triangle. But in P5, we have these kind of like default styles where you can see the background or the fill color of all of these shapes is white, and the stroke color or the outline is always black. And so we can actually change those to, add different colors, and we can also remove them. So let's do a couple of those, and then I think that'll be good enough to get started. So we can start with the face. So if we want to give the face a color, I can do a fill. Okay, so a fill fills the inside of the shape. And again, it goes in order. So if I do a fill before the triangle, it affects the triangle. If I do a fill after the triangle, it doesn't affect the triangle. And with my fill, I can use 3 different types of colors. I can use, or actually it's more than that, but the main ones are the HTML name colors, so like in CSS, the CSS hex colors, and any other CSS rule like RGB or HSL. But I can also use just numbers. So for example, if I do fill as 0, that's going to do a black fill. And see, it applies to everything that comes after. So if I move this down to here, so if it comes after the triangle, it's not going to affect the triangle. Well, it will because I don't have anything else. So it does kind of like go back to the beginning. But if I change this fill to something else like 255 for white, now we have the black fill 0 affecting everything except the triangle, which has the white fill. Okay, so if I move this black fill back up, even if I do white and then I immediately change it back to black, now my triangle is black. So whatever I change the fill to, everything that comes after that in the program is affected by that fill. 0 is just, if I just have one number for fill, and actually let's take a look at the reference here. So if I go to color and I go to fill, so there's a few different types of values. There's a grayscale, which is just one number. 0 is black. 255 is white. Anything in between, like 100, is going to be some gray value. So that's one number. If I have 3 numbers, then I have RGB. RGB is a mixture of red, green, and blue. Okay, so a good place to see this, if we Google RGB sliders. So if I have 0 red, 0 green, 0 blue, you're going to get black. If I increase the amount of red, I get more and more red. If I increase the amount of green, I get more and more green. And if I increase the amount of blue, I get more and more blue. And the range is always 0 to 255. So 0 is the max, 0 is the minimum, 255 is the max. And if I add 2 colors together, like red and green, then I get the combination of those colors. Or sorry, red and blue gives me this pink color. And as I bring the green up, I go from pink to closer and closer to white. So mixing RGB colors is a little challenging because we're kind of trying to imagine what the right mix would be. But that is what we get when we just put colors into P5. So I can get the colors from here. You can also see the RGB values if you look at HTML color codes. So if I go to HTML color codes, and I find a color, so I'll like move this around until I get a color that I like, maybe something around here. I can see the hex value, and I can also see the RGB values. So I can use both. So if I want to use the RGB values, this one is 162 for red, and 108 for green, and 227 for blue. So that's going to change to that purple color. I might want to say here, this is a purple color because we don't necessarily know that just by looking at this. So that's one way that we can do color in P5 using red and green and blue values. We can also use just like the named colors from HTML. So if I want to find something to go with that purple, maybe something yellow, I can click on one of these colors, or I can go to names and jump to color. I'll choose yellow. And maybe I'll use like light yellow goldenrod, or light golden yellow, goldenrod yellow, light goldenrod yellow. So That one sounds good. I can just throw this in here. So I can say fill, and then I have to use quotation marks. That's the big difference. With the numbers, I can just put the numbers directly in. With the fill, I have to use quotation marks because this is actually a string value. I'll talk more about the difference between numbers and strings when we go to our text lesson. So I'm just going to copy that in there. Light yellow goldenrod. And there we go. We have our color. If I want the eyes to be like slightly different colors, I could choose this one and go to my color picker, and there it is. But I could take this and move it over here or make it brighter or something like that. And then I can use the hex code as well. So if I want the second eye to be a little different, I can say fill and put quotation marks, and then I can put a pound for the hex code just like I would in CSS, and then put the fill. And so light goldenrod yellow tells me that it's yellow, but this one doesn't. So I might add like similar to light goldenrod yellow, just so I remember why I chose that. And so then we have a slightly different color there. And so yeah, those are the different ways that we can do colors. There's also alpha if you want to use alpha. So you can use transparency. But so far we've only applied color to the fill. We can also apply color to the stroke. So with the mouth, let's apply this same yellow color, but let's apply it to the stroke. So I'm going to copy that fill, but instead of fill, I'm going to change this to stroke. And it's a little bit hard to see, but you can see now all of these lines are yellow. With the mouth, we don't really see it because the fill is also yellow. But if we want to increase how big the stroke is, we can use the function strokeWeight. And so if I put in like 10 there, now all my lines are going to get really big. So this is kind of screwing up the rest of my drawing. So I'm going to want to change the stroke weight, or maybe just get rid of the stroke completely. So if I go back up to the face, and I use another function, noStroke. And when I have functions with two words, we haven't seen a lot of this. We did see it with create canvas and strokeWeight, so this is a good time to go over this. If you see a function with two words like that, you can see that the second letter is capitalized. Almost all of our functions start with lowercase letters. But if we have a second word in the function, it's going to be capitalized. That's just a readability issue. With P5, we do have to use the functions as they're written in the reference, or else they won't work. So for example, if I put a lowercase s here, nothing's going to happen. In fact, I get an error. So we actually haven't seen an error yet. We'll go over this more in a couple weeks as we get more into JavaScript. But we do get an error because this noStroke is not defined, because the S does have to be capitalized. So the reason we capitalize the second word is just to make it more readable, so that we know this is two words instead of one, like background or triangle. And that's called camel case because there's a little hump right here. So when you hear people say camel case, that's what they're referring to, this style of naming your functions. So we're going to say noStroke there. So now we can see the stroke still applies to our hair and our mouth. So the mouth has this stroke and the hair has this stroke because they come after the stroke. Everything that comes before this has no stroke applied. So now our eyes have no outline and our background head has no outline. For the mouth, another thing I can do if I want to get rid of that center is just do noFill. So it's the same thing as noStroke, but this time applied to the fill. So now we can actually see through the mouth. It looks a little bit weird, maybe not exactly what we want. But maybe we just make the mouth a bit smaller because it is quite wide. So let's make that like 20. Okay, that looks a little more normal. And then the hair has this stroke applied to it. I actually think that works pretty good. If I wanted to choose a different color, I could just do stroke and choose a different color. So maybe if I wanted the hair to be more realistic, like brown, I could do that and just grab those RGBs. So 76, 76, 59. So I'll just put those in there, 76, 76, 59. And since these are just numbers, I do want to put a little comment that says brown, brownish, or yeah, yellowish brown, because we're still in that yellow area. So then if I reload that, okay, so that kind of looks more like hair. We do have a purple face though, so it's not really that necessary to have brown hair. We could go in a different direction with it, like maybe some orange color or something like that. We could always, you know, try something like that. Can I copy these? Yeah, I can. Okay, that kind of looks cool. We have some different color things going on here. So yeah, that's kind of like the colors. That's the stroke and the fill. That's the shape. So for our first assignment for the self-portrait, you are just going to be kind of working with these primitive colors and shapes, and think about how can I put these things together in order to make something that looks more like, you know, an expressive character. So there's a really good reading that I will include in the notes for this. So this is a really interesting reading that I found about character design tips. And it's looking at some characters designed that were inspired by Overwatch, characters on Overwatch. So this designer figured out how to kind of simplify these characters to their basic shape. So a couple of circles for this one character, a big square for another character, and a triangle for this character. So those are kind of the main shapes, and then adding some more complex. So this is like a big square plus like an ellipse, a triangle plus 5 circles, a big square plus a big triangle, then building silhouettes based on that, then adding some color in. And so you can see how you can start with a few simple shapes and slowly build up like a really complex character. So for the self-portrait, I'm just going to be using these sort of primitive shapes, but using it as a way of getting used to the code. You know, if it looks simple, you know, don't worry too much about it. With the self-portrait, you know, I want you guys to try to represent something unique about yourself. Save this code and then upload it, but I'm going to get rid of my code because I don't want you to start from where I left off. I want you to start from scratch. So I'm going to save a version of it so that it still exists, but when I upload the code, I'm going to delete it. One last thing I do want to do before I upload my code is that because I wrote my CSS just for the portfolio, you do see that the main section that gets added by P5 does not fit with the rest of my CSS layout. But there's an easy way to fix that. I'm just going to go into my CSS page here. And where I did this thing with the container, I'm just going to apply that to the main section as well that P5 adds. So I'm just going to write in main here, and it's just going to apply the same thing to this like main section of the P5. So those are going to match each other. So that's a compound CSS rule. I don't know if I went over that before. I don't think so. So I can add the same rules to 2 different selectors just by adding a comma and then including a new selector. So now my main section is going to align with the rest of my design. So I'm going to go over to GitHub, and I'm going to say that I finished my self-portrait example. I'm going to commit that to master. And then I would push this to the origin, but I'm actually going to make 2 commits. So for you guys, if you want to use this as a template, I'm just going to delete my self-portrait just so you can get started from scratch. You can make your own background color, whatever you want. So I'm just going to say draw self-portrait here. So the other code that I made is on GitHub. You can look in the history if you want to remember some stuff, but I do want you guys to start from scratch. So I'm going to commit this. So I'm just going to say cleaned up self-portrait and commit to master. And so now I'm going to push both of those to the origin, and then I'm going to go to my GitHub page. So I can click on view on GitHub. I can also just go to the browser and go to github.com and then type in / my username. It's already there, but I can just type it in, onbmcc, and go to my repositories. There's MMP 210. I can see that I just made a couple commits. And then if I want to go to this, I just have to remember GitHub, onbmcc.github.io /mmp210. It's already in my history, so I can just complete that. You could bookmark that as well. And there we go. Here's my portfolio. That's it for this video. If you guys have any questions, obviously let me know and we can go over it. Hey class, just back for a second. I realized that I forgot to add the thumbnail to our portfolio page. So I just wanted to cover that real quick, and then we'll just make a new commit. So I'm just going to go to my GitHub app first, and I'm going to go back to the earlier version of the self-portrait that I made. And if you ever, commit some changes and want to change stuff back to an old version, this is actually something that you might want to know about. So I'm first going to go to the GitHub app, and I'm going to go to Open in Sublime Text. And I'm going to open up, so I'm going to go to Self-Portrait version 1 and sketch.js. And here's where we left off, but I want to get that old version back just so I can make the thumbnail. And I'm going to open up the console, because we're actually going to use the console in a second. So I'm going to go to Self-Portrait version 1, and there's nothing there right now because I committed this blank version that you guys can use as a template. So I'm going to go over to GitHub desktop, and I'm going to go to the history. So if I want to get the code from a previous version, I can go to this finished self-portrait version, and I can see here's the sketch.js, and here's the code that I wrote. I could copy that from here. So I'll just grab that and copy, and then paste it in here. And so that's a way that I can just grab that code real quick. There's other things that I can do with GitHub, but that'll just be easy for now. And I don't have to commit this, so if I undo it later, or I can commit it, either way. But now I've got that code back, and so I'm just going to reload the page. And what I want to do is I want to get an image of this to use as the thumbnail for this project. There's a cool function in P5 where I can save a copy of the canvas, and it's just the save function. So I can run this in my program, but I can also just run it directly in the console. So the console is useful for debugging stuff, and we can also run some code in there. So if I just write save, and then parentheses, and then semicolon, and hit enter, it's actually going to save a copy of the canvas when I hit it. So if I go back to my Finder and go into my downloads folder, there it is, untitled.png. And if I want to give that a name, I can put that inside the save function. So I can say self-portrait version 1. And so now I have self-portrait version 1.png. So I can use that as the thumbnail. I could also just take that untitled and rename it if I wanted to, but I'm just going to delete that. And I'm going to drag self-portrait version 1.png into this folder. And now I can reference it on my index page as the thumbnail. So I'll go back to Sublime, and I'm going to hit undo and just get rid of this so I don't have to commit it, and close this up. And then I'm going to go to my home page, and here where I have this thumbnail with the default image, I'm going to replace this. It's not a JPEG, so I'm going to delete this whole thing. I have to go into the folder first, so it's self-portrait version 1, and I can just use the autocomplete there. And then I called it the same thing actually, so it's a bit long and repetitive, but that's okay. Self-portrait version 1.png. And so that'll be my thumbnail. When I go back to the browser and go home, now we can see like what my self-portrait actually looks like before I go in there and see the real version. So that's how you can create a thumbnail. You can also use other ways of creating a thumbnail. You can do a screenshot or whatever else, but that's an easy way to do it using the P5 library itself. And so we'll do this, throughout the semester. I might demonstrate it again in the second video, but I probably won't do it in every single video because it will get a little repetitive. But since we're still at the beginning of the semester, I might go over it a couple more times.